Over 21 million. I mean, think about that for a second. That is not just a big number, it is a massive cultural signal. It's the staggering number of people who have watched just one interview about the rich versus poor mindset. So welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely pumped you're here. We are going to be unpacking the viral financial philosophies and wealth generation strategies that have captured the attention of tens of millions of people online. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to look directly at the source material driving this whole phenomenon to figure out exactly what is resonating so deeply with audiences around the globe and how they view money. Right off the bat, the core issue driving this phenomenon basically boils down to this one idea. The gap between the 1% and the 99% is massive. These exact words from financial author Robert Kiyosaki are pulled straight from the source description of this viral interview. And honestly, this single quote sets the stakes for our entire explainer today. This is the core problem that an entire ecosystem of financial content is trying to address. People are feeling that gap, and they are desperately searching for a bridge. Okay, so here is our roadmap for today. We'll start by examining the massive wealth gap, then uncover why most stay poor, and identify the biggest financial mistakes people make. After that, we'll break down assets versus liabilities, and finally, look at the economic urgency driving this whole trend. All right, part one, the massive wealth gap, and why millions are desperately seeking answers. Just look at the sheer scale of this audience. It is staggering. The main rich versus poor interview is sitting at an incredible 21.7 million views all by itself. And then you've got related topics like young people's mistakes at 10 million and converting liabilities pulling in another 8.1 million. What does this actually tell us? Well, it tells us that navigating this wealth gap is a major modern anxiety. A massive engaged audience is actively and urgently trying to understand this divide between the ultra-wealthy and, well, everyone else. So, moving on to part two. Why most stay poor. Let's talk about the poverty trap. The source material here draws a really sharp, uncompromising line between two totally different ways of thinking. On one side, you have the poor mindset, which is defined by behaviors that basically keep people trapped, like fundamentally misunderstanding debt and just accepting this fate of working literally forever. But then, on the flip side, the rich mindset is entirely focused on building wealth, using leverage, and ultimately buying freedom. It's a brilliant way to illustrate their core thesis, right? That wealth isn't just about the size of your paycheck, it is a structural difference in how you think about and actually interact with your money. And wow, that brings us to a wildly provocative claim. They're lying to you about debt. The content suggests that the traditional stuff we're taught about debt isn't just unhelpful, it's fundamentally flawed. Like, it actually acts as a trap that keeps people stuck in the rat race. It is truly fascinating to see just how powerfully this specific message resonates with hundreds of thousands of viewers who feel like standard financial advice has totally failed them. Which naturally leads us into part three, the biggest financial mistakes, specifically focusing on the pitfalls of the young and unaware. So if we distill this advice down into actionable points, the core financial pitfalls kick off with failing to understand how debt actually works, treating all debt like it's a terrible thing rather than a potential tool. Next up is falling into the common traps of the young, like blowing early income on flashy items. The third trap is believing traditional lies about money, like this outdated idea that you can just save your way to massive wealth. And finally, flat out refusing to use leverage to build wealth. The source material argues that sidestepping these common mistakes is literally step one if you want to adopt a wealthy mindset. All right, part four, assets versus liabilities, the wealth shift. This right here, this is the absolute foundational pillar of the entire rich dad philosophy. I know it sounds incredibly simple, but this binary distinction is exactly where most people get it wrong. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. Boom, that's it. So if you go out and buy a shiny new car and the payments, the insurance, and the maintenance just drain your bank account every single month, under this framework, that's a pure liability. But if you pay a rental property or a business that actively generates positive cash flow every month, that's an asset. Grasping this structural difference is exactly how the wealthy view their money. Okay, so how do we actually apply that? Let's walk through the logical steps pulled from the wildly popular How to Convert a Liability into an Asset topic, which, by the way, has over 8 million views itself. Step 1, identify your liabilities. You've got to be brutally honest with yourself about what is draining your pocket. Step 2, change your mindset about debt. Shift away from using debt to buy things that lose value and instead understand how to use it strategically. And step 3, use leverage to build wealth. Basically, that means using other people's money to acquire true assets that generate real cash flow. But why is learning this so absolutely critical right this second? Well, let's get into part 5, the economic urgency and the approaching 2026 predictions. These broader macroeconomic themes add a very real ticking clock to these financial philosophies. Back in 2019, the original viral interview really shone a spotlight on the massive 1% gap. Fast forward to today, and you've got related content highlighting billionaires issuing serious warnings and aggressively selling off their assets. And if we look ahead to 2026, we are seeing some stark predictions, like Kiyosaki's claim that the American empire itself will face a collapse. You can see how this intense sense of urgency is a massive, massive driver for why millions of people are binging this content right now. And honestly, that urgency is perfectly captured by a quote from a related topic that got 4.1 million views. It says, "Billionaires warning, I'm selling, the crash is already here." I mean, when audiences are hit with brutal, urgent warnings like this from prominent financial figures, it creates a very real, palpable demand for answers. It completely explains that huge cultural hunger we talked about at the very beginning of this explainer. People are feeling a desperate need to lock down their financial education immediately because they see major structural economic threats right on the horizon. Which brings us to a pretty crucial question for you to chew on. The source material lays out this incredibly stark contrast between the rich and poor mindsets, the foundational rules of assets versus liabilities, and these super urgent economic warnings being broadcast to millions. So, as these 2026 predictions loom closer and the wealth gap continues to widen, which mindset are you going to choose? Are you going to keep letting liabilities drain your pockets, or will you shift your focus to understanding leverage and acquiring true assets? According to the tens of millions tuning in, the choice is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you in the next one.